Good morning to one and all. My humble pranams to His Divine Soul, Parama Pujya Sri 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 Dr. Balaganath Mahaswamiji, Parama Pujya Sri 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 Dr. Nirmananda Mahaswamiji, and the Reverend Sri Sri Dr. Prakashna Swamiji. I, Dr. Prasad CSMV, HOD Civil Engineering Department at SJBIT, welcome you all to this webinar on sustainability in environmental aspects, organized by Civil Engineering Department. SJBIT was established in the year 2001 and Civil Engineering Department in SJBIT was started in the year 2009. Civil Engineering Department has an intake of 120 UG students and is also running PG programs in structural engineering and CAD structures. The department has a VTU research center and also a consultancy cell. The department has MOUs with industries which is helping faculty and students for academic enrichment and industry interaction. The department is organizing technical talks, FDPs, national and international conferences from time to time for the benefit of civil engineering fraternity. Sustainability has become the order of the day, and hence the idea of organizing this webinar is to highlight challenges faced by us in environmental sustainability. We have with us Dr. Shankar Murthy, professor at National Institute of Industrial Engineering, Mumbai, the right person to talk about the topic. I request Dr. Lakshmi, Professor Civil Engineering Department, SJBIT, to deliver the welcome address and introduce the speaker to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I would like to introduce Dr. Shankar Murthy, sir. He holds a BE Civil from Mysore University, ME in Environmental Engineering from Shivaji University, and PhD in Environmental Science and Engineering from IIT Bombay. He joined NIFTY as Associate Professor in 2006, currently working as Professor since June 2017. The major areas of his research include industrial wastewater management, environment management, process safety management. He has published and presented over 50 papers in various international, national journals, conferences, etc. Guided over 30 masters and he has guided 3 PhDs and now he is guiding 2 students presently. He has over 30 years of experience and he has taken up several research and consultation projects and received several academic awards. Sir, it's nice to have you, sir, and our students are waiting to hear to you, sir. Let's go ahead with the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, good morning. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Prasad, Head Civil Engineering, and Dr. Lakshmi for providing me this opportunity. Definitely, it will be a learning process for me also. And since people are sitting at home, locked, and this is a good opportunity to, utilize the time. And then this is one of the industries or one of the areas or one of the sectors which can even do better during lockdown period. That is the education sector. Okay. Coming to my background, I'm working in National Institute for Training in Industrial Engineering, that is NITI, which is one of the premier institutes of Government of India, established by MHRD along with assistance from UNDP and IOL, that is International Labour Organization, in 1963. We started as a training institute, and later on we included what is known as academic programs, and then these academic programs started right from 1971 until today. We have about 5 programs. The programs are industrial engineering, industrial management, industrial safety and environmental management, and we have manufacturing management and project management. We admit students with Bachelor of Engineering of any branch with minimum first class graduates and qualified GATE and CAT score. And the unique feature or the USP of NITI is we have 100% placement since inception. And also, this is one of the best campuses which is situated in the the commercial capital of India, that is Mumbai, right? So because of this, it has got other advantages. And then like our students, they get to interact with many people, like be it from industry or research and development organization, or the both private as well as the government sectors, right? So therefore, we have a very unique advantage, both the location as well as the support from Government of India, right? And then I'd like to, just for the benefit of students, like we get very few students from Mumbai, from Bangalore or from Karnataka. We can just count hardly on your fingers. Okay. So therefore, I'm inviting you all, or I'm trying to, say few things probably which might interest you, and try to be a part of NITI in coming years, especially those who are in final year and pre-final years. If you can get good score in GATE or CAT, I don't know about CAT, but even if you get good score in GATE, you can get admitted to the MTech level program like industrial engineering or project management or manufacturing management. And if you have a valid CAT score, then you can also get admitted to industrial management and industrial safety and environmental management. And one of the most attractive thing is, especially for students, is the big or fat pay package. Our students, like as I said, it's 100% placement, and everybody gets at least more than one job, and he can select or he can select, or he can definitely will have a choice in selecting a better job. And then the pay package ranges anywhere from 20 to 25 lakhs per annum. Okay, that's very huge. Okay. But again, the institute also expects, or the minimum criteria for selection is you should have GATE or CAT score somewhere around 98%, or 98 and above for the general category students, right? So if you can try and get this, definitely you can be one of the students at NITI campus, right? With that, I think so I'll start my lecture. This is sustainable development, especially with respect to civil engineering or environmental engineering. But basically, sustainable development is very vast and a multi-dimensional concept. Okay. So let me go through that, and let me just define the basics for you. So what is environment? Environment is what surrounds us, which you can feel, touch, smell, and taste. And then I'll be using systems very often in this lecture. Like system can be an arrangement where you have a set of arrangement, they're so connected or related so as to form a unit or an organic whole. So for example, a water supply can be a system, water supply system, and an irrigation system can also be a part of a system, or it's a system itself, right? So therefore, we will also try to see how these systems, various different systems coming under environmental domain, they interact with each other. Well, the common word associated with environmental or civil engineering is pollution. So how do we define pollution? Pollution can be defined as an undesirable change in the physical, chemical and biological characteristics of all the aspects of environment, that is air environment, water environment, land, which can definitely influence or affect health of the people, survival, and all the it will interfere in all the activities of the human and other living organisms. Like for example, if you are trying to take three systems, okay, that is air, then water mass, and then land. Air, water, and land or solid waste, whatever. How they interact with, like amongst themselves. Like for example, acid rain. How acid rain is developed or how acid rain is formed in the atmosphere. Acid rain is a secondary pollutant which is formed because of the release of SOx and NOx from vehicular pollution. And as this pollutants go into atmosphere, and because of multiple and continuous chain of reaction in the presence of sunlight and the moisture, ultimately they become acid mist, H2SO4 and and nitric acid. And when there is precipitation or rainfall, the rainfall washes down all these mists, and then what we get as acid rain. Typically, acid rain has got pH of around 5.5, 5.4 or 5.5, right? Another aspect is the air pollutants. Air pollutants, when they are released to the atmosphere, like they don't see like in which direction they have to travel, like it has to travel. Depending upon the wind direction and wind velocity, it can go from one city to another city, one state to another state, or from one country to another country, or it can also be going from one continent to another continent. And there are some pollutants which are present in our environment, like everywhere. It's omnipotent, like present. Like for example, DDT. DDT we use as insecticide. Of course, DDT is banned throughout the world, but still in India we're using it. And traces of this can be seen everywhere. Like if you look at the interaction of water, land, they're very interrelated to each other. Like you have evapotranspiration and then forms clouds, and then that again brings our rain to the earth. Okay. And if you look at major benefits of science and technology or improvement or improvement in the science and technology, or the standard of living is improved, and then we are producing more and more, and definitely a better quality food. This again because of better science and technology or the innovation or research. And then we are also creating better living spaces. And then you can also, you also have what is known as fast and reliable transportation system, which is also, you can say because of the improvement in science and technology. Okay. And then replacement of invention of machine and replacement of human or animal power is another feather in the cap. And definitely supply of safe drinking water and disposal of the used water, wastewater is again, we can say because of the science and technology. And then the other aspects is you can also have elimination of many infectious diseases and waterborne diseases. Like they say about 70 to 80% of the human diseases, they're waterborne in nature. And like if you're providing good drinking water and if you're trying to eliminate all the waste, then definitely we can control this. And then in the industry, the productivity can be improved because of the invention, right? But at the same time, the flip side of the development is the environmental disasters or the impact on the environment. So this could be overuse of chemical fertilizer, where that might lead to loss of fertile land. And also because of, in the name of, what do you say, development, the forests are disappearing. And then because of the human activity or industrial or vehicular movement, there are a lot of environmental pollution. And then there are also new organisms which develop some resistance to control. So that may be very difficult to get rid of it. Like maybe about, if you recall, about 10 to 15 years, there was one bug which attacked the coconut trees in Karnataka, even Andhra Pradesh. Okay, so that was very difficult to eradicate. So you will have to cut down the coconut tree and then burn the tree so that the entire species is, what do you say, you are getting rid of it. Okay. And there are, like if you look at the history, the agrarian age or society, so where we have a very small activity, like all the wastewater that was released was used for some purpose, and then waste returned to land, and then there was not much. But if you compare the Western world, the Europe was very, what do you say, equipped with respect to the environmental engineering. So they had all the systems for water supply as well as for the treatment of wastewater. But on the other hand, the Americans, they did not bother much. And in the middle of 19th century, there was a lot of pollution produced because of industrialization, industrial revolution. And then the problem of pollution aggravated. And then this, because of this could be, or the reason could be the urbanization and industrialization. And it's even today it is true. And 19th century industrialization and urbanization is the cause of almost all the environmental pollution. And of course, post World War II, a lot of industrialized countries, they wanted to experience an economic boom, so they adopted technology, and then rapid rise in the energy consumption. So because of this, again, air pollution and other pollutants are released. And if you look at the waste cycle in an industrial society, so you have all the waste coming from all the activities. And then it's all because of human activities and industrialization. And then like all the pollutants, such as it could be waterborne, airborne, or some of the soil, means the solid waste were also moved. So because of this, there was a lot of public awareness, and then was created. And finally, somewhere in the year 1960, there was a lot of agitation. And then people concluded that there could be no great society if water, air, dumps of the cities are dirty. That means they have to clean that. And then because of this, the first legislation came into existence, which was the Water Act. Okay, the US EPA, we have in 1970 they introduced this, and of course followed by in 1974 the first Water Act was also introduced in India. Okay. The third world countries, that means those who are developing countries or underdeveloped countries, they were continuously emphasizing on the environment and protection of environment. But whereas the developed countries, they were they were very much into the what is known as industrialization and then modern development. And with this backdrop, United Nations declared 1980 as the decade of international water, drinking water and sanitation decade. And because of which the amount to be spent was huge. But still that was on sharing basis. I think so 1/3 is shared by UN and the rest has to be with the respective countries. Towards the 21st century, the role of technology took the front seat. And then the first, somewhere we use the word sustainable development to solve all the environmental problems, right? And then instead of dealing with advanced technology, what is known as preventive technology was introduced somewhere in 21st century, beginning of 21st century, which is involved in design, which is the preventive technology is designed to reduce the environmental effect of sustainable exploitative philosophy. This is very important. Like earlier, they were only destructive and trying to exploit all the natural resources. And because of introduction of sustainable development in the 21st century, like they try to implement what is known as, or think of doing efficiency, like changing from efficiency, productivity, profitability, to also think about some concerns, show some concerns about health, environmental impact, resource and then energy conservation, waste management, and some implication on the social aspects. So all these things definitely are a part of preventive technology. It's given in detail. I'll not go into details, but one thing I'd like to highlight is the pollution control measures which they took in the beginning of 21st century, somewhere around 70s or 80s. So they started constructing sewage treatment plants and effluent treatment plants in specific industries in order to control the liquid waste and of course the solid waste, and also some pollution control measure towards air pollution. Like some of the industries, this is the latest information, like the 3M, which is globally known Fortune 500 company. They have implemented some of the preventive technology, like they say PPP, pollution prevention pace. Pollution prevention pace means whatever the company is investing in the measures that they are taking towards pollution prevention, definitely in the long run, it's going to pay back. Okay. Like for example, they adopted what is known as reformulation, product reformulation, process modification, equipment redesign, and recovery of waste products for reuse. Reuse, recycle, and reduce, they are the famous 3 R's, because of which one can definitely save a lot of money. And they saved about $30 US way back in early 2000. Well, this commission, World Commission on Environment and Development. So the main objective of this is all the countries come together and involved in what is known as sustainable development. That is coming together and then try to think about sustainable development. And later this WCED was called as Brundtland Commission. This is done because Miss Brundtland, who is the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of Norway, was appointed as the chairperson of the commission somewhere in 1983 by the UN Secretary General. And then she worked on this for almost 4 to 5 years, And then she came up with, or the committee came up with what is known as Brundtland Report. So that was the first initiative where the sustainable development was made popular throughout the world. And because of this, even today we follow, or rather we use the same definition of sustainable development. Sustainable development, it goes like this. Sustainable development can be defined as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. That means there are several ways of defining sustainable development. As I said, it is a multi-dimensional concept. Like it has got 3 dimensions. I'll come to that later. Like for example, another way of defining is we have borrowed this earth from our children. So we have to give it back to them as it is. And otherwise, earlier people were thinking that we have inherited this earth and we have the sole right to use all the resources, but that's not the case. So sustainable development mainly emphasis on the meeting the needs of the present generation, but definitely without they have to leave something for the next generation, so that they definitely have ability to meet their own needs, but provided there are resources available, right? So otherwise, without any resource, then definitely it's not possible to think of sustainable development. Okay, like as I said, it is a 3-dimensional concept: environment, economy, and society. Or we can call 3 P's: people, planet, and profit. Okay, profit is economy, people is society, and planet is environment. Okay, like that includes all the resources, resource conservation, and taking care of environmental pollution, and then definitely preservation of biodiversity. And since the industries are there to make profit, so economy, they have to also earn some profit. So profit and growth, and this growth has to be in a sustainable manner. Okay, and then cost efficiency and definitely valuation of the services. And then at the same time, the people who are involved in production or manufacturing, their health has to be protected. So therefore, and also the society also needs the food, energy, and other health and security services. Okay, there are a few international conferences or summits which gained attention and which emphasis on which stressed on sustainable development, or the first and foremost is Earth Summit, which was in 1992. You all know the agenda of Earth Summit. One of the main document that was signed, and India is one of the signatory to the Earth Summit. It's called Rio Summit or Earth Summit. And then one of the important agenda that was signed was Agenda 21, which talks about the sustainability. Okay, that is, it's a comprehensive action plan for achieving sustainability in 21st century. It talks about concern for natural environment, concern for labor, that is employees, and then human rights, that will take care of both, and then concern for wider community, that is society, and stakeholder involvement is again the people. The other conventions, I'll not go into details of this. This is Basel Convention, because earlier there were a lot of transboundary movement of hazardous waste. Hazardous wastes are highly dangerous. It will cause a lot of impact, health impact on the human beings, also on the environment. So this treaty or this summit, Basel Convention, was signed. India is also one of the signatory. This is to stop the movement of the hazardous waste, transboundary movement of hazardous waste from one country to another country. Okay. Then came in 1997 the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is talking only about the reduction of the greenhouse emissions. Okay, greenhouse emission could be because of any industrial activity or any process activities. Okay, and then the greenhouse gas, there are several greenhouse gases. All these, they are expressed in the form of carbon dioxide. Okay, like for example, carbon dioxide and methane is also one of the greenhouse gases. Like if you are taking carbon dioxide as the base, methane is 21 times more, what do you say, lethal or higher polluting as compared to carbon dioxide. So the one of the conclusions or one of the proposal was to reduce the average emission, the GHG gas emission, by about 5.2%, which was as compared to 1990. And then below that, as compared to 1999, like we have to reduce the GHG emission by about 5.2%. And this has to be achieved by 2008 to 12. But there are a lot of, if you try to see what is the latest information about this, you will see that it was one of the most, what do you say, successful treaties. Okay. And it is a flexible mechanism. We have emission trading, joint implementation, and CDM, clean development mechanism. I think so. I'll not go into details because of shortage of time. So now coming to the pollution, like for example, we have a lot of waste, solid waste, especially from construction demolition waste. You can see this is a common scenario in any of the urban setup where the CD wastes are discharged or they're deposited or thrown on roadside. Okay, so this was somewhere in 2000. A small project was proposed by Delhi because I think so somewhere around that there's some Asian games or one of the international games were proposed. So they thought instead of like making like they thought let's make Delhi look better, beautiful, and this was one of the projects proposed. And then according to statistics, about 10 to 12 million tons of C&D waste is generated in India every year. And Delhi alone generates about 2,000 tons per day. And these wastes are heavy and they're non-biodegradable. And most of the material is concrete or masonry or some bricks also. So what do you do with this? Can this be reused or recycled? Because it's hardly there's anything. There's no. It's inert. That means there's no binding capacity. There's no binding between the different constituents. And then of course it's also non-biodegradable. So therefore, one of the pioneer project that was proposed was a place called Burari, somewhere near outskirts of Delhi. They proposed this plant which can take care of about 500 tons per day, and it's a greenfield project. And this is on proposed by Delhi Municipal Corporation, and it was leased for a period of 10 years, and it was financed by IL&FS, and this was on the build, operate, and transfer basis. So this was the place where it was abandoned land or marshy land, which they used to just dump the waste from the city. And this facility came up there. And this is the ultimate outcome of this. Just by using some binding materials such as cement and then try to pulverize, and you can make these interlocking blocks or the road divider or curb site blocks, paver blocks, etc., etc. So these are the details of the program, sorry, details of the project. Okay. And it can also be used for road construction, which is also certified by Central Road Research Institute. And this is the facility they have in that. One of the most important aspect of plastic waste is plastic is now considered one of the hazardous waste. So what do you do with this? The only thing plastic can be very well managed is try to collect properly, reuse, recycle. And all the plastic that we use, the bottles and other containers, they have different codes depending upon their chemical constituents. So if they are classified into their respective class codes, it can be very easily, recycle. Okay, that is the only way by which you can do that. So now if you look at the human well-being, so what are the various factors that influence or that are responsible for human well-being? So it could be physical, physiological, social, economic and environmental. All these are responsible for well-being. Means you're feeling happy, you're comfortably, staying, right? And definitely economic means you should have employment, income, wealth and market. And then socio-political is like national or personal security. One should have personal security. And of course, liberty. And then you should have facilities for education, healthcare, and definitely culture. And then we also expect a better environment or a clean air, clean water, better soil, or rather try to minimize soil pollution. And then should have good natural mineral resources, and try to have less anthropogenic interference. Again, it depends, human well-being depends upon the ecosystem, goods and services. What are the goods the ecosystem is providing, and what are the services? The basic equation what we have is we produce food, or nature produces food. Nature is the biggest factory. It produces food using carbon dioxide and the moisture present in the atmosphere in the presence of sunlight. What we produce is the sugar or the food. And then we have the carbon dioxide as one of the end products. Sorry, oxygen as the end product. Sorry. Like the green plant in the presence of sunlight, in the like they have what is known as green pigment called chlorophyll. They produce all these things. So this is the world's biggest factory. Okay. So therefore, if you look at the goods and services the ecosystem provides for the benefit of human beings is we have very good mineral resources. We have fossil fuel, we have water, soil and oxygen. And services the ecosystem is providing is regulation of climate. This is very important. Otherwise, you would have very hot or very humid or very cold climate. And regulation of water flows, then nutrient cycling, and then pollination of flowers and crops. This is very important. Like sometimes we have what is known as the ecosystem. Like in the ecosystem, there are different partners who are trying to be part of it, and they are interdependent and they are interrelated. Suppose if pollination is not happening, because nowadays bees are they are very less in number, or they are extinct almost. So if we don't have bees, then there will not be any pollination and we won't be producing any crops, or rather the quantity or the yield of crops reduces. And soil formation and maintenance is very important services one of the important services that the ecosystem is providing us. because soil formation takes a very, very long time. It takes several thousand years to get whatever the fertile topsoil what we see today, right? And of course, maintenance of biodiversity. And these are again different services the ecosystem is providing, like provision for food, fresh water, fuel, fiber, etc., etc. Same thing, whatever we discussed. And then also some cultural services also, like material and non-material benefits of ecosystem, spiritual and inspirational, recreational. Recreational means like if you're listening to a wind, or if you are watching the flow of water in a river, or aesthetics. So everything is the services that you get from the ecosystem. Like as I said, another case study I would like to discuss. Hazardous waste are the waste that is produced from most of the industries, like chemical industries. And these hazardous waste, the industry is not supposed to treat. They're supposed to classify and segregate and then preserve it. And then they are supposed to hand over this to a person who is authorized to take care of it, that is manage this, right? And now because of the, like usually 3 months is the time period where you can store it before it is taken away by the authorized person. But because of lockdown, now that is increased to about probably 6 months, right? This is some statistics, how much hazardous waste we are generating. Of course, slightly old statistics, but still we can say around 4.43 million tons per annum. And then like in that, incinerable hazardous waste generation is around 71,833 tons. Incinerable means these will have some calorific value. Okay, and like for example, one of the common hazardous waste what we see is the sludge that is generated from a sewage treatment plant or any wastewater treatment plant, that is also considered as hazardous waste. And then usually what we do is the conventional is like we have hazardous waste incinerator or designated landfill sites in order to manage or dispose. This is the only way where you can manage hazardous waste. But alternatively, you can also utilize this in cement kilns, in the manufacture of cement, as a auxiliary fuel or add-on fuel to whatever existing fuel they are using. And some of the high calorific value hazardous waste coming from petroleum coke industry, paint sludge, slaughterhouse waste, then waste oil, ETP sludge, as I said, effluent treatment plant sludge, and then any sludge from petrochemical oil refinery. All these definitely will have very high calorific value, and then that can be used comfortably in a cement kiln. See here, the high temperature in the cement kiln, that is the unique feature of this. The flame temperature touches around 2000 degrees centigrade, whereas the inside, the furnace is around, kiln is around 1400 degrees centigrade. Okay, so this is, and if you are using hazardous waste as fuel with the residual residence time of 4 to 5 seconds in an oxygen-rich atmosphere, so this will reduce, or this leads to destruction of all the organic compounds found in the waste. That means no waste is produced. Okay, only some gases that are released because of this may have some acidic nature, but still during the combustion they are neutralized by the raw material being alkaline nature. All these raw material what we are using as a fuel, they're all alkaline in nature, and because of this, even some of the gases that are escaping, which are acidic in nature, they are also neutralized. And then, of course, they get there could be some residue left. Okay, And then interaction of flue gases and the raw material present in the kiln ensure that non-combustible part, that's whatever the residue of this residue is held back in the process and is incorporated into clinker in an irreversible manner. That means it is used in the clinker manufacturing. Okay, clinker are the the stage just before grinding that into fine powder of cement. Okay, they are usually round in shape, right? And then some of the benefits are you need not have to take care of hazardous waste disposal. And then this is an integrated solution for waste management and conservation of fossil fuel. Because of use of this, you can save some fossil fuel. And then immobilization of toxic and heavy material. That everything is taken care within the kiln. And definitely you can reduce energy and cement production cost. One of the disadvantages, some of the emissions might contain metals and volatile organic carbon and other VOCs and other toxic gases. Of course, again, some of the emission standards are also given. And most of these cement industries, they are provided with control equipment such as ESP, which will take care of all these things, right? So that is where you can take care of hazardous waste, right? And what is the status of these goods and services? Like we discussed, and then we are discussing about the services provided by the ecosystem, goods and services provided by the ecosystem. Now, what are the status of this because of human intervention? That is atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, and lithosphere. Like one of the most evident, what everybody talks about is the global warming, okay, or the climate change. If you look at 1980, the carbon dioxide level, they are going almost straight, okay, and the temperature is going in a vertical manner. Like otherwise it was fluctuating. And then if you look at the average 5 years, it is almost increasing. And then the increase in temperature as compared to 1990 is around 0.6, right? That is 0.75, that is plus or minus 2 as compared to 1980 and 1990. And then because of the climate change, this can also go beyond 2 degrees. So what will happen if it goes beyond 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade as compared to pre-industrial level? Okay, like the current global average temperature is around 16.1 degrees centigrade, and average ice age temperature is around 9.4 degrees centigrade. Like suppose the impact of this is all the glaciers or the snow is melted, and that leads to what is known as increase in the floods or rise in the water level. And you can see on the right side the famous Gateway of India, which is in Mumbai. It is one of the tourist spots. And if there is increase in temperature because of climate change by 2 degrees, you can see almost it is it's almost submerged. And then if it is like it is submerged to some extent, of course, if it increases by about 4 degrees, then it is almost submerged, right? And if you look at the water quality in major cities of different states, and if you look at the concentration of arsenic, which is one of the lethal or toxic substance, the safe drinking limit is only 0.01 milligrams per liter. And if you look at some of the states, they have as high as 2.4. Luckily, Karnataka is still below, but still not meeting the standards. Okay, and groundwater is also somewhere close to 0.05. And hypoxic zones are those zones in the natural water bodies which have depletion of oxygen. That means dissolved oxygen level, if it goes below 4 or 4.5, then the aquatic animals feel somewhat uncomfortable, and they try to move towards higher level of oxygen. If they don't get, then what you see in the bottom picture is the fish kill or death of fish because of devoid of oxygen. And this is the zone, hypoxic zone around the world. Of course, India is still not very much, but still you can see some of the areas in the Western world, they're almost reached the endangered level. So what you see here, the black one, and the another side by side, you have two streams. Okay, this is called Mithi River in Mumbai. It's one of the rivers which takes birth because of the overflow from. There are 7 lakes in Mumbai which is supplying water for drinking purpose. 2 of the lakes, that is Powai and Vihar Lake, the overflow of this is the Mithi River, okay, which runs through Powai and then it goes down till Dadar and all. But during non-monsoon, you can see how polluted it is because of the people was staying around that. Okay. If you look at the scenario, Mumbai sewage scenario, the population, of course, 2011 is about 12.4 million, and slum population is around 6.5 million, and water supply is 3,350 million liters per day, and approximately about 80% of that goes as sewage. It's around 2,600 MLD. And then like they have about 62% of sewage network coverage, because mostly in slums and all, it's very difficult to collect. So that again, it is open drain and reaches nearby water body. And approximately 1,700 MLD is collected, about 65%. And what we do with this? Okay, so Mumbai is a national capital as far as the economics is concerned, but the land cost is very, very high. So therefore, the provision for treating the sewage is huge, but still we have good old aerated lagoons which can treat about 430 million liters per day. And then we have other outfalls, marine outfalls. Marine outfall is one, like you are laying a pipe which goes inside the sea, and then the waste or the sewage is disposed of, right? And then we have another treatment plant which can take care of about 390, but still a lot of wastewater is untreated. And if you look at the water distribution in India, this is in billion cubic meter. This was released in somewhere in 2013. Like as we know, about 80% of water is used for irrigation. 2010 and like 2050, it's increasing. But drinking water, only 6% of available fresh water is reserved for it. But we are planning to, like the expected projection is about doubling that, and industry almost more than double, and then other sources almost more than double. So like it's almost 1.5 times. Like how do we get this? Like with the current situation that we have a lot of industrial pollution, and most of the rivers are polluted. Like we don't have other source, so we'll have to search for alternative source. So what is that alternative source? Like we tried to clean Ganga. This Ganga action plan was implemented in 1986, and the main objective pollution abatement, that is pollution prevention, and then improvement in water quality, and then diversion and treatment of domestic and industrial wastewater, at least the primary level. Okay, the improvement in water quality and pollution abatement, they tried to construct some Ganga action plan is still going on. Okay, phase, I don't know, 5th or 6th now. And now all the IITs are clubbed together and they're trying to give some solution. All the 7 old IITs. And IIT Kanpur is coordinating this activity. Pollution abatement, of course, they try to construct primary treatment facilities. But definitely there is not much improvement in water quality, especially the Ganga is considered as holy river, and people like most of the pilgrimages, when they visit Haridwar and all, Kashi or Haridwar, they try to take holy dip. But according to the tests conducted, the E. coli is much higher than the specified quality, and it is unfit for taking bath, right? But still people have that blind belief and they're doing it. So one of the solutions that one of the industries, that is Rashtriya Chemicals and Fertilizers, which is situated in Mumbai, they had two. And then the water was supplied by Bombay Municipal Corporation. And this is RCF is highly water intensive, and there's no any other water supply source. And they require around 30 to 40 million liters, even just for cooling purpose. And since they were not getting that water from the municipal corporation, the cooling water towers were shut down, and the production was stopped for about 20 days. Sorry, about 15 days. And the loss incurred was up to 50 crores. So therefore, the industry thought for a while, and then they came with two proposals. One is like we have sea nearby, they can use the seawater, desalinate, and then try to use that in the process. Or use sewage treatment plant waste, that is domestic sewage as a source, and treat that and then reuse it. So they adopted for second option, that is sewage treatment plant, establishment of sewage treatment plant. And they propose what is known as tertiary treatment, that is reverse osmosis process. And at that time, the cost was maybe around, I think so, 40 crores. Okay, 40 crores. But here they have to get sewage. Again, the sewage is controlled by the municipal corporation. And the amount of water that the municipal corporation they were providing was rupees 22 per cubic meter. Whereas domestic domestic supply was highly subsidized. It was only 0.6 rupees per cubic meter. So when they are asking for, when they are stopping that, the revenue is stopped for the BMC. So the BMC gave a green signal with a, with a proposal that they have to, the RCF has to pay rupees 60, okay, 0.6, that is 60 paisa for every liter of sewage they are using, right? So therefore, with this, they successfully implemented what is known as the RO plant, which is a tertiary unit. And this was finally completed in 2000, and till today it is working, it's in good working condition. Okay. That is another example I just wanted to quote. The surface water quality as proposed by a Central Pollution Control Board, or the rivers or the water bodies are classified according to the best designated best usage. Okay, like we have A, B, C, D, E. Like A is drinking water source without conventional treatment, but after disinfection. That means even if you are taking the water from the class A, which has got again some requirement with respect to different, with respect to different parameters. This I'll not go into details. But still, disinfection is that killing of harmful microorganisms is essential. And the class C is a drinking water source after conventional treatment and disinfection. Okay. And coming to oceans, which are huge bodies, they absorb a lot of heat. And then almost 30% of the world's coral reef are almost severely damaged. And then another 60% will be damaged by 2030. And this will have a severe impact on fish, because the coral reef is the breeding place for fishes. And also absorption of the carbon dioxide from the ocean surface, it's also adding a lot of carbon into the water. And then pH is turning, or the pH of the water is turning very, very acidic. And that is again leading to fish kill. And if you look at the biota, that is the number of species with respect to marine, freshwater, terrestrial, as well as others. Like the index was 100, somewhere in 70, and towards 2000 it has come as low as 60. Okay. The other examples of human intervention is, I'm not sure about this lake, Bellandur Lake in Bangalore, because I got this photograph, but I'm not sure. I think so. You people can throw some light on this later when we are discussing. And this is the normal scene. What we see, this is India Gate in Delhi, somewhere in November, December, because of the fog. And Devnar dump is one of the largest dumping ground for the municipal solid waste, which is 111 hectares. Imagine 111 hectares of land in Mumbai. What is the land cost? Okay. And this is, of course, unfortunately, the sports activity is also affected. And I was referring to this figure that time. This is giving the climate change, impact of climate change. Like on the x-axis left side, you have the global temperature. On the right side, you have concentration of carbon dioxide. Like carbon dioxide is increasing right from 1980, where industrialization was on peak. And then it is increasing even today. And you can see the increase in temperature. Okay. So therefore, human action is the only reason, or is the only reason for the degradation of ecosystem, goods and services. That is excess consumption of fossil fuel for many industrial or vehicular purpose, then excessive deforestation, then use of more fertilizers, and extraction of natural resources. Of course, all these are the reasons, and you can say the picture says 1,000 words. They say this is the Uttarakhand floods during 2013, and of course this is a scene in 18, last two years back. Heavy rains and the local train is stranded somewhere in Vashi Virar. It is a lifeline of Mumbai. It almost carries half of Mumbai population towards their workplace. And then you can see the other picture, which is totally immersed in water. Okay. So all these things are unsustainable. What we are discussing about sustainable development. So all things are unsustainable, and these are all because of human intervention. Right? So the sustainability they go beyond global warming and climate change. But definitely you should think of resource depletion, saving, or trying to conserve resource, that is fuel, minerals, and then if you are allowing this unsustainable nature, then most of the fishermen, they are out of job, and all the health and safety concerns because of hazardous waste, and then energy security, then increased disparity, that is poor will become poor or will become poor, and rich will become rich and rich. Poverty and inequality, especially with respect to the resource sharing and other things. So these are the 17 sustainable development goals proposed by UN. And goal number 13, 12, that is responsible consumption and production. Like this is referring to responsible consumption and production of natural resources and saving something for the future. Okay, last few slides. There are some few tools for sustainable development. I cannot go into details because LCA, the life cycle assessment itself, is a very large and very huge topic in itself. Several books have been written on LCA, right? Another very important tool is design for environment. When we are designing any product, like you have to think environment, and then some thinking should go in terms of environment so that you can do justice to environment and avoid what is known as the environmental pollution. So some of the basic objectives of design for environment is the design for recyclability. Like at the end of its lifetime, any product that is used can be recycled, or you should have provision for recycling. And that can be used in other products. Like for example, all the components in a computer, right? They can be definitely used in other computers, or can be used in other manufacturing facilities. And then design for remanufacturing. Like for example, any product that is manufactured, like for example, automobiles. Like Volkswagen Polo is one which the manufacturing or the design is such a way that about 95% of the different parts in that can be disassembled, and the good ones can be reused, and then they can be remanufactured. And also you should design for disposal, like disposal on landfill in such a way that it is not going to further degrade the land. And you should always design for ease of recycle and disposal. That's very important. So therefore, concluding this, human well-being definitely depends on ecosystem goods and services. And most of these goods and services are being degraded because of human intervention. And these issues are very, very highly complex, and they are interdisciplinary and then multidisciplinary also. And then the present situation as of now is unsustainable. Like we'll have to think of newer methods whereby you can make it sustainable. Okay. So definitely sustainability is not only environmental protection, but also the health of people, the community, the resources, and of course the profit also. Okay. So therefore what we should do as an engineer, like before we design, we need to know what to design. That is, solve the right problem rather than solving the problem right. Right? That's, of course, you can understand what is the meaning of that. So we also need to assess the design, that is quantification assessment. Like what is the impact of this design tomorrow when it is given for use for the stakeholders. We also need to know how to design. Perhaps different design principles are required so that you can do it in a better way. So learning outcomes, I feel you have recognized the importance of sustainability, and you can also analyze and evaluate what are the problems from sustainability, perspective, and then and understand the reason for unsustainability. Right? I hope this is all I have from my side. There are several things which you can decide. To conclude, I would only say that the famous story that 5 blind men trying to touch elephant and say elephant is like this, elephant is like this. So sustainable development is something like that. Like it has got, like as I said, it is multi-dimensional. Okay, and even if you take one dimension, you can discuss for days together. Okay, I hope I'm not bothered much. I've taken a lot of your time. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, there are 2 questions. I
Yes,
would
sir.
like to read those questions. For sustainable development, who is more responsible, developed countries or developing countries?
Okay. Actually, you try to see the papers that have been papers. It's the developed countries that are responsible for this, because they have utilized all all the resources, and in US some of the metals are not they are out of stock. But now they are trying to advocate the developing countries not to do the mistakes same what they have done years back or decades back. But you have at the global level some agencies such as UN, which is trying to they say polluter pays. Suppose US, China is polluting more, then they are supposed to be responsible for that. So they are supposed to pay for the pollution. Of course, now since we have already seen the pollution done by the developed countries, the developing countries are now cautious. They are going for sustainable solutions.
Like you have marine outfalls which are harmful to the environment. Still, why in Bombay you are netting out part of it into the marine outfalls? Why is
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Okay. Like marine water bodies are huge water bodies, huge, very huge. And there the mixing capacity is very, very high. And especially like if you look at marine outfalls, even if you go to Chennai or any state which is having seashore, many industries, they have their outfall. And then it is assumed that when they're discharging controlled manner, because of the dilution, not on the marine ecosystem, but it can be explored. It is one of the solutions.
Sir, there are a few more questions. We can, knowing your mail ID, I will definitely
Yeah,
mail it
definitely.
to you for further this one, sir.
Sure.
Sir, I thank our management, principal, HOD for having provided this opportunity for our students to hear from you, sir. And you did a really nice job of delivering a good lecture. Our students will be showing the responses as soon as we get the questions in the chat box. Thank you very much, sir. It was successful because you made yourself free at this hour to come and deliver the lecture. So I thank you, sir, and I thank our principal, management, and HOD, sir, and all my colleagues in making the webinar a successful program, sir. And last but not the least, our students also have been good many numbers they have participated. I also thank them. I thank you all, sir.
Thank you for providing interact with you all. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your valuable time.
Yes, sir.
I also thank all our audience for making our program a successful one.
Okay, sir. We'll keep in touch, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch. Thank you.